back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Saturday lunch show with myself, Michael Wright, and Jen Hurst. Jen, how are you?
Doing great, thank you. It's been a really nice, relaxing week.
It has, and I hopefully many of the people watching this also share that sentiment. There is something about that half term after we come back in September. I think it's a godsend in terms of reframing and just getting us over that next final hump that is the lead up to Christmas. So I sincerely hope everyone has had a restorative and a nice half term, and that you're ready to get back to teaching in earnest next Monday. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We are going to be talking about the impact of cutting teacher training bursaries, which I know has been a very hot topic in the music education community. I know this because myself and Jen are subscribed to many of the advocates and all of the associations that are fighting for keeping music bursaries for teacher training. But I'm no doubt, in terms of your field of education, no doubt I'm sure your associations are also doing the same as well. Massive impacts for next year and beyond. So we're here to talk about those potential impacts, our personal expertise with training, with the bursaries, and certainly how they helped me out. Or, well, I say helped me out, but I would rather say maybe not getting in the way, shall we say, without giving too much away for the show. Also, just have a chat about really the next step forwards in terms of training bursaries and really how it aligns with everything that we do in teaching. So before we begin, we have to give a shout out to our wonderful sponsors, one of which are Hatchet Learning. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. All right. Gosh, big topic.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Big topic. So
this is a big topic. And just thinking about this kind of the landscape of the bursaries I personally think this is quite cyclical. It goes around, it weaves, it changes over time. I know I remember seeing online, Michael, that you had mentioned that how much you had benefited from your bursary in a comment that you'd posted, but I remember thinking at that time when I read that, I didn't get one. When I trained, there was no music teacher bursary, no music teacher training bursary, and I remember feeling quite perturbed about that at the time. So I think that whatever the way forward is, there's definitely got to be some sort of thought about it being equitable, access to becoming a teacher. Obviously, you do your undergrad, you get qualified to a certain level. But at that time, I remember as a music specialist, we had a combined course where we trained with drama teachers, maths teachers, and DT teachers. And I remember some people did get the bursary on the same course and some of us didn't. So I think there's something for me that's always going to kind of stick to me. In fact, I think I remember mentioning in a previous show, my sister actually got one and I didn't. We were on different courses at slightly different times. So for me, I feel like the equity of the bursary programme is something that needs to be thought about long and hard, and I'll probably come back to that later on. Just going into what the research says about the role of bursaries and the role that those bursaries play in terms of teacher recruitment and retention, I feel like teacher recruitment and retention is something that's of real importance. And you spoke about the advocates that we work with, Mike, and that we engage with in music education. And myself as an advocate for music education, I think one of the most important things is to have great, high quality teachers in front of our children, well-trained teachers. And I think in terms of teacher recruitment and retention, it's fine getting people over the line, but we actually want them to stay in the profession. Bursaries obviously have a big role to play in that. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. You mentioned about the retention. According to TED, according to a website, shall I say, that are enrolled in education, the estimated impact is 2,400 fewer trainees next year, which is significant. Bursaries for English, art and design, music and RE are being removed entirely. Biology and geography bursaries are cut from £26,000 to £5,000, a huge drop off. Language bursaries reduced from £26,000 to £20,000. However, STEM subjects, maths, physics, chemistry, computing, they remain at £29,000 and £31,000 respectively. So, like you said, it's going to cause more of a division for people who are going to study to be a teacher. And if there are going to be trainee teachers like yourself who have gone on these mixed programs, let's say you are an English teacher and you're mixing with a maths teacher, you're not going to get any bursary as an English teacher, yet as a maths teacher you're sitting pretty on £29,000 or £31,000. Yeah, well, first and foremost, I mean, we probably need to start with that one. The not inequality, but the equity of bursaries. And what do you think is going to be the impact on these training courses with?
I obviously, there's like you say, this prediction of 2,400 fewer trainees when there's already such an issue with actually getting people to come and contribute, and I say contribute, come and commit to that training. I think it's interesting because you mentioned STEM subjects as retaining their bursary, but actually in biology, there's another warning on the impact from the Royal Society of Biology that say that the drastic reduction from 26, they go down to 5,000. So they're not getting their full bursary as per the other STEM subjects. There's that inequity again, going down to 5,000. They're really concerned about that destabilising the recruitment pipeline for biology teachers. And this is just as so many of those subjects that you've mentioned, Michael, started to just pick back up in terms of the numbers of teachers that were needed. But equally, saying that, we've got, 40% under target in music at the moment, 66% under target in art and design. RE, religious education under target, but with a 40% increase in applications for this academic year. So it was starting to move in the right direction, but still not anywhere near being where we want it to be. And I do think that ultimately the impact of this is going to be that people are going to feel that perhaps this just isn't for me. And also the other thing about removing the bursary, I suppose, is that it doesn't give a great kind of representation of what you might experience when you get into the profession. So if that's where you're starting with no bursary, what's that going to look like 5, 7, 10 years down the line? It's kind of off-putting, I suppose, for some people, even from the jump. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, well, I mean, that leads into my next notes about the long-term impact of that no funding and the way that you put it, but how does that no funding look like in years to come? Before we begin that, though, I do want to give a shout out to our second sponsor of the show, the Chalk and Talk podcast. If you're looking for another great education podcast, check out the Chalk and Talk with Anna Stoke. Anna is a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. On her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods, how-to guides for teaching maths facts, tips for evaluating, research show claims. She really does a lot. She brings on top-notch guests, educators, researchers, and policymakers, and discusses issues that directly impact teachers and students. Chalk and Talk is for anyone interested in education. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. Right, the long-term aspect of this one. Well, first and foremost, you mentioned it's cyclical, and it's the same issues that we had when I trained in 2014. When I joined the teaching profession, we were numbers-wise at a low point. The bursaries that were given out to teachers were again weighted to our shorted subjects, or I hate to say it, core subjects. And we have the same thing happening, but probably in a more pronounced way, that subjects like biology, which I presumed would have been part of that core, are now getting a significant reduction. Very, very surprised to see English having their bursaries removed. I mean, it's fair to say that things might move quickly. So as of speaking, it might have changed, or there might be some U-turn. But as of we speak today, it's being removed. I link it back to the rewarding teachers and rewarding those who stay at it in the long game. It is a rewarding profession, but it's also incredibly taxing, and it's also incredibly demanding of everything about a person. And I get it. They want to pump the money in to these shortage subjects to get students, trained up as best they possibly can. But what's to say, and I'll say this from my experience, what's to say that a chemistry teacher signs up, does their PGC, does their school-based training, whatever it is, gets their very generous bursary. They basically get their fees paid for in terms of their training and university. They might get their accommodation paid for if they're renting. They get a lot of help. What's to say that within 5 years' time, which is roughly the time frame of a teacher's career, shall we say, in the UK, what's to say that they're just not going to go and leave?
Yeah,
And then all those people,
interesting.
all those people that have gone in and had that bursary, and then all of a sudden, well, I'm all right now. I mean, my teacher education experience didn't cost me a penny, really. So I'm not really liking it now. Okay, I'm just going to go and clear off then and work in wherever it is. It doesn't really encourage retention, and those. I mean, when I said at the beginning, I benefited somewhat. It's kind of a grey area. In terms of what I got. I mean, what I got was peanuts in terms of the rest of my cohorts in music, because they had a category scale. So what I got was literally peanuts. And if it wasn't for a very, very kind lady who was a landlord, who actually was a teacher, who I lodged with when I was doing my PGC, who basically gave me really favorable rates in terms of living with her and her family. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be a teacher. I would struggle. I'd have to drop out because financially it wouldn't have worked for me.
Well, so, if you don't mind me just jumping in just to say, the one thing that I haven't looked at training bursaries because it hasn't impacted me. I haven't looked at that for years.
Yeah.
I'm shocked to see that a year's salary for a new teacher is a 30K at best. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money for somebody to. I know that people have to live, but and like you just said, you've got to pay your rent and all the rest of it. I think there needs to be some sort of means tested approach to this, Mike. For me, I feel like that is the fairest way to do this, because to say some people get nothing and some people get £30,000, and then, as you say, they may not even remain in the profession. That's shocking to me. Just wanted to kind of mention the gravity of that figure. That is a lot of money. For somebody to benefit, and then for someone to not benefit from everybody's doing the same thing.
Yeah. Even Tom Rogers mentioned that as a great point to mention about the bursaries, and I mean, you and I have been teaching long enough to know that there is going to be a lot of contention for those who aren't getting bursaries. Now, it's fair. I'll probably be fair to the teacher providers and universities. If there are people that are applying, I'm sure there are going to be some means tested grants and loans, and they're going to get perhaps some help. But if you're paying, I don't know how much the PGC fees are now. They're probably the same as when I did it, in probably a bit more in 2014. That help is still going to be, it's not going to, in comparison to those that are getting that 30 grand, it's going to be a drop in the ocean. It's like, yes, you're going to perhaps help me with 25% of my fees, or, you know, you can get student loans and grants out, but you then still have to pay that money back. How great, I won't jump the gun too much, because I do want to kind of share my kind of story with the bursaries and the things that I had. What about those coming from low income families? And now they're being saddled with undergraduate debt, because you obviously have to get an undergraduate degree, go and get your PGCE, add that all in together. Your paycheck is going to be significantly lower than the people that haven't had that impact, really. And it also relates to retention bonuses too, as well. From what I understand, the NFEI, I read it say that the bursary increases correlate with higher recruitment and sustained supply. So they say cost effective compared to retention bonuses. That's all well and good, but that's probably only really applicable for maths, physics, chemistry, and computing, really, isn't it? For those who get that extra bonus, it's like they're already at a loss, you know?
That's a really, really important point about where you're starting at that point of joining a PGC. You're already coming in with significant debt, and it's a lot more expensive to train now on an undergraduate degree than it was certainly when I qualified. So for maximum tuition fees, as you mentioned, for a PGC, it's £9,535 for a full-time year. Part-time, £7,145 for a part-time year. Yeah, so that's additionally a lot of money. But I think, you see, now for me, one feeling I do have about all of this is that there's got to be some degree of vocation with teaching, or at least I believe there should be. I'm quite traditional in my outlook on education, and I think that there should be some degree of vocation there. You know, we're not going into banking in the City of London, we're going into teaching. With any profession that you choose to go into, there's got to be some degree of self-investment. You either invest in yourself through training, so that's your tuition fee. You invest in some good coaching or some great mentoring. You invest in, I don't know, going and doing some shadowing somewhere in the profession that you'd like to go into. So I do believe in a personal investment in what is going to be your future career. But I just think that means testing across the country, people are coming from all walks of life, to means test and look at who gets a bursary and what degree of bursary they would get would be much fairer to ensure that representation is seen in classrooms. Or I don't know, tell us in the comments, do you think that representation even matters in education? Do we need to consider that? I personally think we do need to consider it, but I think that, you know, we've got to think about how are we going to achieve that if everybody's just at the same place, everybody's got to be at the same starting point. But then also, if you're really good at maths, we're going to give you £30,000. Hold on a second. And if you teach the guitar and you like Bob Dylan, it'd be nice if you join us, but actually we can get somebody who does the drama to do a bit of music as well. You know, come on, we've got to think about this properly.
I play guitar and I like Bob Dylan. Does that mean I'm in trouble then? Does that mean the drama teacher's going to come in?
Yeah, I think you need
clear off, mate.
To really make some plans. You need to really make some plans. Go
listen to Highway 61 by yourself, mate. I'm going to go and do some. I'm going to do some work.
Yeah, the drama teacher will come and cover it. You know, I really think we need to think about this. That there's all sorts of people coming from all walks of life in our classroom, and children, I believe, need to see teachers that can bring some sort of cultural representation that they can relate to. They're not going to see that all through their school day. They're not going to see it all across their week. But how are we going to bring a range of teachers into the classroom if we're saying that there is this absolute inequity in at the training stage? Anyway, let's continue on. So thinking about, go ahead.
Sorry, it just occurred to me when you're talking about schools or schools and areas which are disadvantaged. Surely not. This is also going to have a massive impact on schools that need it. So rural schools,
Yeah.
schools that really don't have that cultural capital or even the actual financial capital.
Of course.
Those schools which are already fighting an uphill battle to teach their cohort and to serve the community and to compete or try to keep on level with others, they're going to have a massive impact too, because they're not going to be able to recruit or get the candidates, because there won't be enough candidates. And let's say a teacher wants to enter the profession who comes from a disadvantaged background, who teaches art design, who just has their ambition to be an art design teacher. They're going to look at this and go, right, well, that's another hurdle that I need to clear. Or they might have gone to their local school, and their local school says, we absolutely love you. Look, you know what? Get your training in. You can have your first placement here in terms of your training. Potentially that's out of the window. I mean, how do you feel about how the cuts to the bursary are going to affect disadvantaged and rural areas?
I think that, like I say, you know, people are not at the same starting point before you even getting out of the gates. People are not starting from the same position. So there's got to be an incentive. The incentive, before I talk about incentive, like I've mentioned, you should have a passion to teach. That we should have people coming into the profession who want to be in the profession, not people who necessarily just can't think of something else to do, whatever. People give lots of reasons why they become teachers. We want people who actually want to impart knowledge, career changers, people who've been working in industry, that's fantastic as well. And then people who want to do it because it meant something to them. They have a favourite teacher, they really help them to excel in life, etc., etc. But how on earth are we going to ensure there is representation? How are we going to make sure that even once people get into the profession, they feel they can remain, if they've got, as you mentioned, that really heavy burden financially, that they've got this backlog to clear of all this debt? We've got to think about this on a more careful level. That being said, I do feel that there's always a bit of sacrifice when you go into any profession when you're starting off. So I think that we've got to find a bit of balance. I've never felt that the whole bursary situation was particularly fair, so I think I'm in my corner on that one.
Yeah. Well, there
in
you go.
terms of in terms of just going back to the shortage of teachers, which we're already dealing with that, but we know that we're going to see potentially an increase in that area with people not being able to access a bursary.
Sure.
Bridget White, who's over at Music Mark, she's the CEO of Music Mark. She actually said about this, we're already in a teacher recruitment and retention crisis, she says. So a decision like this, removing the bursary, is going to be felt across the country. The result is likely to be more schools unable to recruit teachers with the skills needed to deliver a music education, take out music, enter any subject that's losing their bursary. This will inevitably result in unequal access for our children and young people to the rich, broad and balanced education that they're entitled to. So then it's not only which teachers are coming in, it's what we can actually offer on the curriculum, because if you haven't got the trained teachers in that profession, in that subject area, if you haven't got the trained teachers in that subject area, you've got to think about what the curriculum offer then looks like. And there's been such a huge drive over recent years with the outgoing Ofsted framework. The whole focus was the broad and balanced curriculum, wasn't it? It was all about what students were going to experience across their week. We really don't need to be going backwards. I feel like we don't want to be going backwards at this point. And like I've said on previous sessions that we've had, Michael, I just need everyone to remember what we were all doing when the pandemic happened. People turned to music. People turned to in the lack of community, finding ways to get together in whatever way they could to create something together. Creativity, music, these things became so important. Design, through social media, people were podcasting, people were blogging, people were pulling things together just to keep themselves ticking over. So there's a real importance in ensuring that we don't go backwards and we continue this vision of broad and balanced for our young people. I think it's essential.
Very, a salient point there. It's the capital between subjects that I think what you're alluding to, and I love that going backwards. It's broad and balanced, broad and balanced, broad and balanced.
That's right.
We heard nothing but broad and balanced, and that was at a time when, you know, the subjects like music and others that were underrepresented in education were saying, great, broad and balanced, but what about us? What about us? And the irony is that there have been money thrown at extracurricular, for example, which we've covered, you know, the extracurricular sector in terms of the arts. There's initiatives that have been thrown in, and then on one hand you have this, which is now, you know, taking away a significant financial help for those who need it in terms of going into the profession. Before we move on to the next section, I do want to give a shout out to AQA, another sponsor of Teacher Talk Radio. AQA know teachers are the real experts in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers like you, combining your insights with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that generally make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into a new school year, or we're already in a new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers to feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers, just head to their website or search AQA, We Are the Experts. So yeah, I'll let you take this one.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, just thinking about this kind of the bursaries going, but it is happening at the same time as we have this investment, and this is taking a bit of an arts focus again here, the investment in the new National Centre for Arts and Music. And we know that the centre was due to launch next year. I'm hearing that the tender hasn't gone out. We're hearing that the tender hasn't gone out for who's going to be behind that centre, and people are getting itchy feet. People are wondering what's happening there. But it aims to boost arts education and partnerships, linked to £30 million growth in music, and it's a package of growth for £30 million and £270 million cultural growth. But my main thinking here is, have we gotten ourselves into a bit of a muddle where to fund for one, we've had to draw back and pull back on something else? And I'm all for the Centre for the National Centre for Arts and Music. I think it's a great initiative, potentially, once we know a bit more of the fine detail. But we don't want one thing in place of another. So I wonder to what extent we've kind of run ahead with that plan. Has there been a sense of, we've got to fund it somewhere, so we're going to take it from these bursaries, and is that the right decision? I'm not sure. What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, it's interesting that then now there's a grey area in terms of it happening and who will run it and how it will be implemented, given the massive advertisement, or the kind of the massive, hey, we got this
big campaign.
Great. Yeah, the big campaign. Isn't it great? Isn't it amazing? Right, you lot over there, you can shut up now because you got what you wanted, didn't you? Everything's amazing. and then they were like, yeah, about that. Well, we're not quite sure yet. And then it's interesting how it coincides with now from what we see, the backlash to these bursaries. And I wouldn't want to pontificate on why this isn't happening and make the links in terms of the bursaries, but you're quite right. From the outside, it does seem to me that it's one without the other, and it's almost like a balancing of these bursaries and the centre. I agree. I think any centre, arts and music, or anything, STEM centres, anything like that, are only giving a benefit to our profession.
Absolutely.
If they're implemented well, and the design of it is thought out, then it could play a massive role in additional teacher training, or become something that teachers and educators just need in terms of developing new research and developing new initiatives, creating think tanks, to find out really how certain aspects, certain policies are working and how they need to tweak, which is it's a necessity in education anyway. You can't just teach and go, right, there it is, it's working now. There's always a refinement process. There's always an element of action research in what we do. Great, that
Definitely.
works. Okay, it didn't work this term. Why didn't it work that term? Oh, well, because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, then next time when I teach it, I'm going to go and tweak it. And you know, us teachers do that on the micro, don't we? We do that on the daily, on the termly basis. So I expect that to also be part of our profession. That the profession does the same thing. It's self-generating. It's thinking. So if that's the case, that's amazing. But is it at the cost of these bursaries? And if they're umming and ahhing, I don't know. Could it be linked? Could it not be linked? I mean, it's
Yeah, like you say, I wouldn't ever want to second guess what's going on behind the scenes. We just don't know. And I think
yeah.
we're all doing a great job of being quite patient and waiting it out. But at some point, some announcements are going to need to be made about what's happening next. I think, I'm a big advocate for teacher wellbeing, and I do think there's something to consider there also with the National Centre is fantastic. There's a big chunk of the money that's assigned to extracurricular provision. We do need enough teachers to offer that extracurricular provision, and people that can offer high quality extracurricular provision. And what we don't want to see is teachers overly stretched. I think there's a lot of wellbeing programs going on from the teachers that I speak to. From my own experience, there's a lot of consideration from senior leaders for teachers and their wellbeing, and we want this to be really carefully crafted so that whatever the offer is on that extracurricular program that's going to be rolled out to however many schools across the country, we're not going to see less teachers coming in because they can't afford to do the training as a teacher, then additional workload in terms of the extracurricular offer, then we have a real problem, because who's actually going to deliver this fantastic program that's supposed to be happening? So we really, really need to, it all just needs a little bit of unpicking and some careful thought. I think that's the sense that I get. Everything is important. All elements of what we offer in schools are important, including extracurricular provision, wraparound care, all of those things. But there just needs to be a little bit of thought to ensure that it's actually plausible. It can actually happen in real time.
Yeah. Before I read another ad read, there's a question I wanted to ask you, and it's almost like a question within a question, and it kind of relates to that lack of funding. Could we get someone who isn't qualified to teach it? But then I just had another thought that, hang on a minute, there's a certain cyclical, again, the cyclical nature here of can't do the funding, can't afford the funding, get unqualified teachers, but we've got too many unqualified teachers. Why are they unqualified? Because they can't get the funding. Anyway, before I move on to that, we'll mention Hatchet Learning again for those who have just joined us. If you have just joined us, hello. Hopefully it's not raining where you are. It's just started pouring down here in Devon, and when we get rain, we get rain. You know, there's no halfways about it. So we've got a couple of storms brewing, as they say, around here. This show is brought to you in partnership with Hatchet Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit hatchetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So you mentioned extracurricular. Could any of those initiatives that they've set up, could they be run theoretically without unqualified teachers, with volunteers?
Yeah, I think in the best cases that I've seen, everybody's been contributing to the extracurricular program. So you don't have to be a trained, qualified teacher to be able to offer a skill to young people. So, and of course, we all the time in our subject area and in drama and in sports, we get visitors to come in. So we get people who come in with a specialism, and it's not the formally trained, PGCE trained or whatever route formally trained classroom teacher who's delivering. So I don't think it's got to be limited to classroom teachers that are going to offer those programs when we find out what those programs are to be and what they're to look like and how they're to be and when they're to be facilitated. I just think that this is more of a matter of careful consideration of the funding. It's all got to be budgeted, it's all got to be paid for. So the additional funding that's being offered for extracurricular programs, perhaps that won't be the school-based teachers, the trained teachers that are delivering those programs. And I think that's fine, so long as it's going to be a rich offer that's going to be delivered well. Certainly also teachers, one of the things that we know teachers love to do often, in the experience I've had over the years, they love to offer an extracurricular activity outside of their subject area. So there's scope there for thinking about how that can all work. But I think linking this back to the bursary matter, we just need to have enough people who are willing to offer these programs. That's the thing. We need to have enough people around who feel it's manageable and they're willing to offer it.
Yeah. But that's the profession in a nutshell. Goodwill, isn't it? Our profession, certainly in this country, relies on goodwill. If you take goodwill out of teaching, the whole thing crumbles. The teachers that will go above and beyond, but then they'll go more than that, because above and beyond is never enough. You got to go further than that. You're really counting on a lot of people to do that. And yeah, we do that. We inherently do that. It's part of our nature as teachers. Like you said, we offer extracurricular. When I was in my previous school, I was teaching, about 6 or 7. I was involved running 6 or 7 different clubs, ensembles, on top of my full timetable. One of which was outside of music. It's great. I loved it. It's absolutely amazing. But there's a lot of onus, shall we say, on teachers to do that. But my point earlier on is that if you're going to flood the education sector with brilliant extracurricular facilitators, people who know how to run workshops and facilitate that kind of workshop environment, are we now going to get a situation where there's going to be a flood of those, but we're not going to have as many qualified teachers in position because they couldn't afford the bursaries for the training? Therefore, is their education system going to be reliant on these people who are unqualified to the point where they're not going to say take over, but it's going to be an over reliance? Do you see that happening perhaps with the effect of the bursaries, as you mentioned, 1 year, 5 years? Do you reckon it's going to happen?
Well, I think that school leaders are really clever at staffing delivery, staffing the curriculum with what they've got. They're really clever at making it work. They are skilled, to use a better term, they're skilled in making it work. So I feel like we don't panic, because we know that schools are going to be staffed in whatever way. That's what school leaders do. They find solutions to challenges, and hats off to them for doing that so well.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that another thing I just want to kind of touch on is what you had said, not to ignore your point, but it all ties in, I guess, to go back to the point on teachers and doing more than they're teaching, because actually, more than it just being something that we like to do, it's actually tied into the teacher standards. When you're training as a teacher, there's that little bit about the wider life of the school and how you're contributing to that. So I feel like it's almost like an unspoken but written expectation from the jump, right? From the beginning, you're being looked at when you're training, when you're going through that process, you're being looked at in terms of what else you're able to offer, what else you're willing to offer. So I just think that my approach to this, I've had different experiences throughout my teaching career, so I'm probably putting different hats on and trying to unpick this one a little bit. My personal response to this would be not panic, because schools will be staffed in the best way possible, but to think about with extracurricular provision, which is going to be so important, has been, will continue to be so important. It's about making sure that everybody's doing their bit from my perspective. If everybody's doing a bit of something, then 1 or 5 or 6 people or 10 people are not doing everything and giving up all of their time. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not, I don't want to kind of go down the route of panic stations. I just kind of think a bit of measured thinking about possible. We're going to need solutions, right? The bursaries have been taken away, so we're going to need solutions and ways forwards. And I think that is going to be that, yes, great, we're going to have this extracurricular provision, we're going to have the national centre, but actually what we're going to ask teachers to do is to do what's manageable. And once teachers are being asked to do what is manageable, I'm happy. That's kind of my outlook, really.
Yeah, 100%. That I thought about that as we were discussing the bursaries, and my first thought was, what about the schools that will struggle not only with the providing the extracurricular through lack of staffing, but also going about their jobs as teachers and running a schools with the lack of staffing. And I agree with your sentiment. There will always be, schools will always find a way.
They'll find solutions.
Leaders, they'll find the solutions. They'll find a way to plug the gaps and fix short-term and long-term scenarios. I think it's just normal for us to look at this potential issue of the bursary cuts affecting the retention and
100%.
bringing people into the profession, because, you know, our first thought is, okay, does that mean if I'm in a department of 4, 2 people leave, can we replace them? Are we able to replace them, you know?
One thing I will say, well, of course, that's the worst when that happens. Somebody goes and then they're not replaced. That's always it rocks the boat. It's unsettling, and it can be quite stressful, actually, being in that situation. But just to say, you never know who's listening in, Michael. And I'm really glad that we're even mentioning this. This is kind of a byproduct of my prior thinking for this show. I hadn't really considered that point of, actually, perhaps it's about where that funding for the extracurricular program comes in. Maybe it's got to be that there's got to be a bit of thought before that money's just dished out. It's got to be a bit of thought about who really needs the funding, because I'm sure it's not going to be every school that's going to be running these extracurricular programs. I don't know. We don't know. It's pie in the sky. We haven't got the fine detail, but I would say, thinking about which schools are struggling to staff or a broad and balanced curriculum, you know, maybe that's where the need is going to be for that funding for the extracurricular provision. And that's where you help to close that gap that exists, because actually you can't ask your very stretched classroom teachers to also provide wraparound care with a really, you know, exciting and broad extracurricular program. Hold on a second. It's got to be manageable. So maybe that's where you find the opportunity to plug that funding gap through supporting the extracurricular. Does that make sense? What I'm getting at?
It's almost like the going through the other route. It's like, yes, we have the gap in bursaries, but hang on a bit, this extracurricular funding. You know, people can get very creative with the accounting and very creative with whom they bring in. And is there a way that we can actually circumnavigate this potential issue with this funding? And thank you for that. I hadn't necessarily thought that divergently about it, but
I hadn't.
But you know, you are absolutely spot on, and I'm sure hopefully there'll be some school leaders listening to this, and they're saying, no, don't you worry. If it happens, and if we've got this, I think I've got an idea in terms of how we can potentially help moving forward, really. So,
but even at a higher level than that, because actually this is a policy thing, and yes, great, we want the money for the extracurricular program. Hold on, what are you going to do about the fact that we haven't got these teachers now signing up in 26-27 because there's no bursary? So there's just got to be a little bit of joined up thinking here, and I'm believing that it's going on behind the scenes. I'm hoping that it's going on behind the scenes, and that's what I mean when I say you don't know who's listening in. I hope some policymakers get wind of the conversation and can think about it ahead of time. It's good that we're talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Before we move on to the next point, I wanted to read again AQA, which I read out in the show before. If you haven't joined us, it's one of our friends who do sponsor Teachers Talk Radio. AQA know teachers are the real expert in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers like you, combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that generally make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisation, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into a new school year, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. If you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers just like you, head to their website or search AQA. We work with the experts. Right, this point, I saved it till the last because I mentioned at the beginning because it affects both of us, but it's a point I'd love to get into. Student financial need and equity. And it's we're talking about, we mentioned briefly about obviously the lower income families. And if I may, I'd like to begin. I come from a lower income family. I don't come from a particular amount of wealth or moderate wealth. So in terms of my education, higher education, I was accepted for all of the higher means tested bursaries and grants. I would like to say the same for PGCE, but I wasn't. So like I said, I got my bursary wasn't, I don't know, I hardly call it a bursary. It wasn't really anything, to be honest with you. But I struggled initially because I had to get a student loan out, and it was a case of before going PGCE, I made that choice. Do I get myself further into debt, or do I not and perhaps go down another route where I don't necessarily need to get myself into debt for a change of career? I chose the former because at that time and that kind of moment in my life and my career, I was like, I feel like I'm entering the next stage where I really need to put all of my expertise into something more productive and to try to help out young people or any people that matter navigate a career in music, or if I'm lucky enough to teach in other subjects, I'll do this one. So I wanted to put myself in that stance as an educator. But the impact, financial impact of not having a significant bursary help was, and probably to this day still felt, actually, it still felt, certainly in terms of my pay packet. We haven't discussed this, but what about that aspect of a potential teacher who wants to come into the industry, the teaching profession, I beg your pardon, but they're essentially being told, sorry, your subject doesn't qualify for this, so we're not going to give you anything. What do you reckon are the impact for those teachers that come in and want to teach, but they don't come from that background?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen trainee teachers come in and bust a gut to do everything they can to do their portfolio, to do their planning, to do their classroom teaching, contribute to the wider life of the school, and then go and work a part-time job. They're working evenings, they're working weekends, they're doing what they have to do. And you don't do those things if you don't have to. You might do a bit of volunteering if you don't have to, or you might have a job that you go to once a week or something like that if it's a choice. But people don't put themselves in that situation unless, where they're literally all around the clock working, unless they have to. And I think you don't get something for nothing. So I think that, like I've already said, really, there's got to be some personal contribution, some personal investment. And that probably goes for the large majority of us. That's a decision you've made to go into a profession, not only teaching, in any profession. I believe you do invest in yourself. However, for people in the most challenging of circumstances, it undoubtedly will prevent them from training, and that's a problem, because then we just never change the wider picture of diversity in the profession. We just never change it if not being able to come into the profession for financial reasons is the barrier. We just go backwards. We just undo all of the good things that have been happening to support teachers or trainees that want to become, qualified teachers. And to me, it's just as plain as that.
Yeah, yeah, well put, well put. And let's not forget as well, the UK training, the way that we train teachers, our education is world class. There are countries and there are organizations that look at how the UK
100%.
trains the teachers and go, we like that. Don't quote me exactly, but I hear that the South African model, the teaching model, is basically from the UK model.
Right.
When I speak to colleagues around the world and mention I'm a teacher in the UK, there's a reverence to this, and they just want to ask me so many questions because they see our standard of training along with the Finnish model as well as world leading. So, we have a reputation, we really do. We have a reputation, a good reputation for training teachers, and in addition to that, the way that we train teachers, we over time, I feel like we do our best to prepare them for any situation and in any environment. And my PGC training has greatly benefited how I approach my teaching, even probably more so than if I went and did a school-based training, because it just set me up for different scenarios and gave me all these what ifs, and of course there's no substitute for experience and getting thrown into the deep end. But I thank my training program for helping me think about other ways and how I can reframe situations, and that was for rigorous training, that was through just intensive pedagogy, but also a sense that one can carve out their own identity in teaching. And I think from my perspective, because I'm quite stubborn, and there's a Finnish word that it's called sisu. So sisu it's courage, resilience with a little bit of stubbornness. So it's almost like this stoic way of kind of going about things. And I was talking to my mum about this, and she always says, you have sisu, you have this, you have the Finnish sisu, and it was my determination and just I shall not be beaten attitude to go in and say, I'm going to make this work. Yes, it's very, very difficult, but I'm going to make it work. That's me, and that's what I chose to do. And thank goodness there were circumstances which helped me along the way. Like I said, the landlady who helped me out with incredibly generous rent in terms of lodging in a spare room. Little moments like that kept me going and kept me going, okay, well, maybe I can do this. Maybe I got to help. But I totally understand that there will be people that won't be in that situation. And it might be they'll have a choice of going, do I want to go down this teacher training route, or do I want to do something else, knowing that I don't have the bursary and I can't really afford the 9,000 plus all the other additional costs, that they throw in. And if I do get student loan, that 9,000 is going to turn into whatever inflation it is, or whatever percent. So it's tough. It is tough. But before we close the show, I want to end on some positives. You've been talking about balancing cultural investment and making kind of these adjustments, and talking about policy as well. So if there's anyone else listening here who is involved in policy, thank you for tuning in, and if you can chip in some way in terms of the comments, that'd be lovely. But what would you recommend, Jen? Policy changes to balance that cultural investment with teacher recruitment. What would you personally do? What would you like to see happen?
I think for me, I definitely don't have the solution to this one, but I think what I can contribute here is that it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. The byproduct of our conversation brought up this thought for me of, just bringing the best people together to actually think of some solutions here, rather than just falling into a problem and then we just have less teachers, less qualified teachers. Then we have worse behaviour because the children are not being taught by people who have confidence in the room, have strong
Mm.
pedagogy, have good subject knowledge. We don't want to go back to some of the things we've had over some of the years in the past. So we need to see the best teachers and school leaders in consultation, sitting around the table together and thinking about these solutions. I do not have the solutions myself as an individual person, but I do believe that if you get great minds together, you can, a bit like we've done here today, Michael, you can start to unpick this and think ahead of time. So we know that this is for 2026-27 start, but let's think, we've got some months ahead of us. Let's think about how we can find some creative solutions so that we can continue to have great people in front of the children, because I genuinely believe and feel that the importance of children's experience in school, yes, what they're learning, but the whole experience they have, all of that comes, all of that comes from who's standing in front of them and the diet they're getting across their week, the balanced curriculum that they're receiving, the mood of the teacher. It drives so much. If people are just exhausted and burnt out, they're going to be miserable, they're going to be frustrated, they're going to take that out on the children in the worst instances. Then a child's going through the rest of their day not knowing what they did and they're upset, etc., etc. I'm talking about worst case scenario, but these things happen. Let's actually get people in the room, enough people in the school to make sure that the children are having the best experience. And how we get to that, for me, is to get the best people around the table to have some conversations about the solutions.
Yeah. I think it solves a lot, doesn't it? When you've got a problem, you bring people together and you just like, right, let's lay it out on the table and let's we've got this problem, let's come up with a solution to help. I think that obviously there's going to be a disparate unequal aspect in terms of where the bursaries are going to go. We're going to have PGC courses and training courses. You're going to have that elephant in the room where those who are getting the top money compared to those who aren't getting anything. I think the training providers obviously need to think about that. They need to consider that. Now, I'm not saying that all the trainee teachers are going to be in day one in the lecture hall in the PGC or whatever university, and there's going to be a massive brawl that's going to erupt because someone's boasting about what they've bought with their 31,000. The next thing you know, all of the English and art design teachers are getting the chairs and ganging up. No, I'm not talking about that. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily happen. No, it wouldn't necessarily happen. But what can happen with the training programs is that they'll need to address this unbalance, and I think they'll need to do a lot in terms of not only supporting the students financially in terms of their training, but also, like you said, those teachers who have to work two jobs just to pay their way. There needs to be more support for them, because we talk about burnout of current teachers. What you don't want to have is a cohort of burned out new teachers who
This is it.
worked for was it PGC's 2 years now in this country. So you don't want to have them entering the profession and already they're on their knees because they've had so much, and then you throw in a very demanding job. It's just, not everyone has broad shoulders, and at some point something's going to give. And I think in terms of how we take care of our teachers in the short term, at least in terms of when they enter the profession, is utterly important as well. And also I have to consider the course leaders as well. Those who are, there's another thing we didn't consider is the lecturers and the professors who are teaching courses now, who are now, for example, English is very, very popular, and as it should be in terms of a training route. But now if they're not getting any bursaries, their numbers are going to fall. Yeah. And therefore universities in a numbers game, they're going to go, well, we don't have many students that signed up for your course. We need to evaluate whether or not it's cost effective. So
you're already seeing that. You're already seeing creativity as to how teacher training routes are being offered. The universities are already having to not necessarily close courses, but merge, think about how to, combine. So yeah, you're already seeing that. And there's going to be more of that. There'll be
There'll
more
be
of that
more of
unless
that.
we, with this reduction, with the removal, should I say, the removal of the bursary and then the reduction in biology. Yeah, it's definitely something that's got to be thought about ahead of time. We've still got time to find some solutions.
We do. We have still got a few months. So, and hopefully come next September, October, there will be something in place which will benefit everyone. It might not be what everybody wants, but at least it's something that will help to navigate this tough time. Jen, thank you so much for today. It's great chatting with you as always.
Great to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for everyone who has tuned in as well to the Saturday show. We hope you've enjoyed and found it informative in terms of these massive changes that are happening with the teacher training bursaries. Thank you again for joining in. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with hopefully a very, very special guest who will be talking from Australia about various aspects of Australian education. He's a musician as well. A music teacher, so there's going to be a really informative chat in that one. So if we're able to secure it, then please tune in a couple of weeks' time for that one. Until then, everyone, I wish you a lovely weekend, and we'll see you. See you later, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And as soon as I say that, I was about to kind of lead into the banner, and then it wasn't there. It's okay, Jen. It's all right. Things didn't go to plan. We didn't end as we should. I'm just gonna improv a little bit just to kind of smooth out this little mistake, and we're gonna end now.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.